Afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I'm Christopher Hawthorne. I'm the Chief Design Officer for the City of Los Angeles and the Director of the third LA series at USC Dornsife. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the final event of our academic year at USC in collaboration with the Huntington USC Institute on California and the West. We have a really terrific group of panelists today. I will let them describe their particular roles when we get to their part of the program, but just briefly, Matt Glesne and Sarah Molina-Pearson from the Department of City Planning, Karin, Liljegren, and Albert Escobar from Omgivning, Thomas Robinson and Michael Faulkner from Lever Architects. Those two architectural offices, both winners in our low-rise design challenge, which we'll talk about in a minute. And finally, Alejandro Gonzalez, former colleague of ours in the mayor's office and now working on housing and housing policy at Genesis. We all have a sense of the hold that this ideal of the single family house, particularly in architectural terms, perhaps best epitomized by the glamour of the case study houses in the immediate post-war period, continues to exert in Los Angeles, particularly in terms of how we think of our civic identity. And we have continued to think about the single family house as the locus, really the primary locus or site for architectural experimentation and innovation. And in a broader sense, regionally, we have really used the single family subdivision as a kind of infrastructure, really, again, cementing this idea that there's a close connection, perhaps a closer connection in Los Angeles than in any other big American city between the single family house and the idea of what Los Angeles means. And that has left us with a map of the city that looks something like this, with close to 80% of our residential land reserved for single-family development, slight adjustment in the last 5 years with the ability to build an accessory dwelling unit, a second unit, and we'll talk about the steps we're now taking in the direction of 3 and 4 units in that territory. But that paradigm of the single-family house and its dominance in the kind of civic conversation really ignores a long history in the architectural in our architectural past of a really rich legacy of multifamily experimental innovative projects at precisely the scale that we'll be talking about today, that is low-rise multifamily projects going all the way back to bungalow courts in the tail end of the 19th century, and including, of course, work by Irving Gill, Schindler, Neutra, and others. And we also face and really need to reckon with a history of race-based exclusionary lending and zoning practices, redlining, not least of those, as well as, of course, a present and future of climate change, which really adds to the sense of urgency in terms of locating our housing more intelligently near jobs and transit. The potential to change zoning in single-family neighborhoods that has been proposed from Sacramento hit for several years a number of roadblocks, particularly in terms of support from Southern California lawmakers. The early versions of what we'll be talking about today, SB 9, which more aggressively would have upzoned single-family neighborhoods, faltered over several years. And that left us in a kind of a stalemate or a logjam where there didn't seem to be any avenues for a productive conversation that might lower the temperature in terms of discussing these important issues related to the future of single-family neighborhoods, which is one of the reasons we organized the Low Rise Design Challenge beginning in 2020 the way that we did. And we really wanted to reverse a dynamic that is often at play in architectural competitions where visions, sometimes utopian visions, are imposed by architects onto communities from without. We wanted to flip that inside out and really begin with a series of community engagement listening sessions, which were largely organized by Alejandro, who we'll hear from a little bit later, to really start with hearing from communities about what they valued most in their residential neighborhoods, what they would like to add, what they would like to protect, perhaps what they used to have that they'd like to bring back. And we made these conversations the basis of our design brief for that competition. And we're very pleased ultimately to receive nearly 400 applications. This is a winner in one of the 4 categories in the design challenge by Von Weisenberger, a young Brooklyn architect that imagined combining 2 single-family lots in a category called corners to create 8 to 10 units and a corner store or retail space. And Omgivning, who you've already heard about today, was the only firm to win in 2 different categories. This is a winning proposal called Hidden Gardens in the fourplex category, which we'll hear about in a little bit. And then we did in one category called subdivision kind of anticipate SB9 or a version of SB9, the ability to subdivide lots. And the winning design shown here was by Louisa Van Leer Architects, imagining taking advantage of the alleys in the Garvanza neighborhood of Northeast Los Angeles as new frontage for housing enabled by the kind of subdivision of single-family parcels that is now legal under SB9. So SB9 finally did pass. This effort of many years in Sacramento to address this question statewide did pass at the end of last year, Senate Bill 9, which allows the subdivision of single-family parcels and the ability to build 2 units on each of those newly created parcels. So essentially a kind of fourplex bill, but with significant constraints, which we'll hear about in a little bit. The reaction from cities around the state really varied to the passage of SB9. Woodside, infamously in Northern California, toyed with the idea of declaring the entire city a mountain lion habitat as a way to sidestep SB9, although after a significant backlash, they did give up on that idea. In Los Angeles, we have taken a much different approach, I think it's fair to say, which resulted in this implementation memo from February, and we'll hear a little bit more about this, and a couple of constraints and details of the language of SB9 are detailed in this implementation memo. We'll get into those during the conversation. But that leaves us looking again at this map as we move into the conversation this afternoon and thinking about the prospects of a bill like SB9 and its potential to remake the residential map of Los Angeles. There have been some projections, this one from Turner Center in Berkeley, that the number of parcels that would really be feasible for conversion under SB9 is quite low, something like 1% of total single-family lots. But we have begun to hear from architects and others that there might be more potential than that. It will vary from city to city, of course, but part of the research we've been doing in the mayor's office in connection with the Urban Institute project has suggested that we have something like 400,000 single-family parcels that currently only have 1 unit and aren't in an HBOZ, a protected area that does not allow SB9 projects. Roughly half of those are in the San Fernando Valley, and that's really where we've seen the preponderance of ADU construction as well. Roughly 30% in tracts with median income below AMI. And that's one significant potential both opportunity and challenge to keep in mind as we move into this world enabled by SB9. There are more than 250,000 low and moderate income households living in homes that they own, and I think supporting the stability of these households, given the cost, as we all know, of producing new affordable housing, is one significant opportunity in thinking about housing at this scale. And in closing, we were very encouraged to hear in the mayor's State of the City address earlier this month his call to really lean into SB9 and to create something he described as the low-rise design lab. You see a rendering from Von Weisenberger there included in the budget package that was released in the middle of this month. Here it is a little bit closer up. And we'll talk a little bit today as we begin to think about the shape that this lab might take in collaboration with the Department of City Planning. And then here are the words that we heard from the mayor during the State of the City this year, that he was encouraging that we lean into SB9. He talked about a lot of fear that did accompany the change in ADU laws, a lot of visions that didn't really come to pass, and now we have seen that ADUs continue to make up between 20 and 25% of our permitted housing units every year. So we have an opportunity to fold a lot of what we've learned in the ADU work and from the Low-Rise Design Challenge into this new low-rise design lab, but doing that successfully will be mean understanding both the architectural and the policy implications, which is what we're going to dig into today. So a couple of guiding questions, I think, for the conversation this afternoon with our great group of panelists, both from a design and a policy point of view. How can we promote a version of SB9 that really emphasizes neighborhood cohesion, autonomy, self-determination? These were really the themes that we dug into so much in the low-rise engagement and in the design challenge itself. And then as these projects begin to accelerate in terms of numbers, what can we on the city side do to arm homeowners? I think particularly in some of those communities that we were just talking about, who might want to develop SB9 projects on their own, or maybe hearing from developers or being approached by developers. How can we arm them with a full understanding of what the new law enables? So that is a bit of an overview of what we hope to get into this afternoon, and we'll do that essentially with kind of four mini panels. And let me bring Karin and Albert from Omgivning, ask them to join us. As I mentioned, you were the only office that won in two categories in the low rise challenge, which was quite a feat given how many entries we saw. So first, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourselves and telling us a little bit about the office and your roles there. And we'll start with Karin.
Hi, I'm Karin Liljegren. I'm the principal and founder of Omgivning, and we're an architecture and interiors firm in LA. We focus on adaptive reuse and urban fill projects in Los Angeles, and we have a really wide range of project types.
Hi, Albert Escobar. I'm project lead at Omgivning, and I led the team for the low-rise competition entries.
Thank you so much. And I know that you've been thinking about how to modify those entries for an SB9 world. So I think you have some images you're going to share with us, and I'll hand it over to you.
Yes, and thank you so much for having us here. Because when we originally did these competition entries, there was no SB9. And actually I did a very, very similar project at my own house in Culver City, but it was an R2 in early 2000s. And I think, as a firm, we're very interested in how to densify Los Angeles, but doing it the right way. So this has all been really, really fun to dive into and dig into. If you want to start the next slide. And also I want to do a shout out to those listening sessions, which I think we're going to hear a little bit more about later, but those were extremely helpful in terms of, as Christopher was saying, to kind of start with input from the community before architects dive in and start coming up with all of their great ideas, right? So it's like having that more as a jumping off part. And so specifically the three questions that we took from that, as well as our own thinking and dove into the ideas, was, as cities become more dense, how can they become more equitable, sustainable, and porous? And the second, how can we create a balance between indoor and outdoor spaces and find the value in those spaces, especially after COVID, that became even more obvious. And how to create a more human-centered design in multifamily housing. So Albert's going to go through, we did the fourplex competition entry and subdivision. We're going to go through subdivision specifically, just because it seemed a little bit more applicable to having an existing home and doing a lot split. And then at the end, we're going to do a high level review of showing what the SB9 implementation means for both of these entries.
Thank you, Karin. So when we started, we wanted to create this framework for LA neighborhoods to allow for more density, but not sacrificing the importance of character, scale, and open outdoor spaces. We wanted to keep the existing residents and retain the scale of the neighborhood. Also allow the ability to have smaller lots that afford a greater range of family types, the ability to own, as well as allow for multi-generational living through small additions to the existing house. We wanted to focus also on sharing, so having shared yards, shared agricultural easements, as well as the flexibility, adaptability to grow across time and throughout the block. So as you can see in the diagram, we kept the existing house and then we subdivided the lot into lot A and lot B, where we have a duplex in the rear. And then we wanted to create these easements in between the buildings as well as in the front yard and the rear yard for people to share. And then we also introduced these ideas of slow streets and green alleys. We collaborated with Studio MLA on the landscape and programming of the outdoor spaces and created a variation of communal areas for residents to gather and socialize. So we have like vegetable gardens in the front yard. We have a barbecue area in between the buildings and a more private area in the rear for people to use. And then we also wanted to rethink the front yard as a usable and functional space, which also encourages connection with the neighbors. And then also we wanted to alter the existing single family residence to encourage multi-generational living and other alternative types of living. So you can have like your grandparents live in like in a small unit / kitchenette area within the single family house. And then we also reduced parking, but still allow for each unit to have at least one parking stall. And this came from the listening sessions of how low income communities still rely heavily on the car and how important it is for them and their needs. And then we also introduced this idea of upside down space planning where bedrooms are located on the ground floor and living spaces are above, and which allows for a more compatible layout with the existing bedrooms of the single family home, while living spaces are connected to balconies, which allow in more natural light and ventilation into the units, as well as a visual connection between the neighborhood. And each dwelling unit has a private outdoor space in addition to the communal space between them. The competition brief stated that you could design up to 33 feet, but we actually decided to scale it down to 24 feet. And this came back to like, we believe that densification doesn't necessarily mean that you need to build taller structures, but that reduced setbacks and proper arrangement of program can create dense urban housing that still provides natural light and ventilation in the units. And this framework promotes a balance of private and social spaces, both indoor and outdoor, for residents to work, create, play, and relax. Density is increased without compromising adequate space, light, and airflow through the property, and also creating a healthy environment and connection to the nature. So we looked at how SB9 can be applied to the submerged project. So you can do a 2-unit development with an existing single family home. You can do a lot split. Neither lot should be less than 40% of the original lot size. Lots need to be 1,200 square foot minimum. There's no setbacks for existing structures. There's reduced setbacks for side and rear yards up to 4-foot minimum, but you still need to allow for a 10-foot passageway into each of the entry units. And then you're allowed to have a JADU, but not allowed to demo or alter the existing home if the tenant is occupied in the last 3 years. There's also a reduction in parking, so you can do off-street parking of up to 1 unit allowed if you're close to a major transit center or a ride share area. And then in our initial proposal, we're showing access to the alley. This is not currently allowed because an alley is not considered a public way, but this might be changed in the upcoming ordinances that would allow that. And then we also looked at how the SB9 can be applied to our 4-plex entry, which is the Hidden Gardens project. So you can do a 2-unit development plus an ADU plus a JADU, and that would work if you have an empty parcel, a no lot split, and no prior tenant on the property. And the front yard setbacks still need to follow the zoning requirements, and a JADU would be allowed within a main unit, and as long as it's 500 square foot minimum. And then a lot of the elements from the submerge are still here. So like reduced setbacks, reduced parking, and then no access to the alley driveway. And then lastly, I kind of just want to share these diagrams that was provided by Will Wright from the AIA, and they were done by architect Tracy Stone, just to show different scenarios how SB9 can be applied to a property. So again, you can do like a flag lot situation, or you can do a narrow lot condition, or even a corner lot condition. And there are some restrictions and some benefits for each one, depending on the property size. But these are just kind of like some demonstrations of what can be applied to it on SB9. And that's it.
Terrific, thank you. I think that question of incorporating the potential of incorporating the alleys, which was such a popular element of so many of the low-rise entries, is going to be a question to keep an eye on very much going forward. Thank you very much, and we will also see you back soon for the full panel discussion. That's really, really helpful. I think this is exactly where we are in the process, thinking about where the best ideas from low-rise might be incorporated into SB9. And that's one of the goals of this low-rise design lab, is really testing out some of those solutions and seeing where we might find some opportunity for SB9 projects that really promote kind of neighborhood scale and continuity as a way of really building broader support and constituency for these kinds of changes.
I'm curious to understand how we can design in a way that still respects autonomy for specific households, but also creates a shared space and also maintains that privacy at the same time. I think that's, as we try to introduce a new housing typology and a new ownership type, specifically in the community that has been left out of a lot of homeownership opportunities in the past, like how can we offer a new product that still maintains that sense of autonomy? Mm-hmm. And I think that's still the question we have.
Yes, and Karin, I'll turn to you with this, because your proposals were really smart about thinking of this kind of threshold and gradation of space between public, and fully private. I think one of the things we're going to have to learn from an architectural and kind of societal point of view is how to navigate those shared spaces, how to understand them. And you had the really effective kind of gradations of, carving out some communal space, but also some dedicated private space for individual units. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, and I think it really starts so much with the policy and how it can be integrated also with the building and fire codes, because right now there's a lot of conflicts that are going to restrict so much of what we can do. And the more that we can provide this flexibility, incentivize, and show some really good models, like what you're trying to do with just having some of our ideas, right, go out to the public, the more that, or how you have ADU models that you can just purchase, and go through plan check that have been vetted. The more that we can show people like good ways to do it, but part of that process, like the ease of being able to do easements and shared space, because right now, and again, I don't know for sure because I haven't tried to do it myself, but my understanding, it's complicated. People don't even know where to start. They don't even know they can do it. So I'm really excited to dig into how CLTs could potentially, the community land trust, not the other CLTs, right, can potentially help in terms of these community shared spaces. And the driveway easements, sorry. And I know I'm talking a little bit about like conflicts or the challenges, but really sure, the conflicts and the challenges are what are going to limit this ability for it to be more community engaging and shared, because of the difficulties with that. So for example, a lot of the driveway requirements, like we had shown ours off of a alley, which currently, I guess you can't use an alley as a public way. I didn't know that. And it sounds like something planning is looking into how that could be modified. Or if you had a lot split and you have to have frontage, you have to have a driveway that goes back in two separate lots with driveway access. Anyway, there's a lot of like in the weeds kinds of things.
No, these are going to be the crucial details. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but just easy ways that we can have easements, shared spaces, and make that process easy. I think that's going to be the thing that really opens the door.
Mm-hmm. If there's anything we hadn't covered that any of you would like to say as we move toward a close, it's Karin.
Just excited that I really feel like this is a great opportunity for more home ownership in LA, which is huge.
I agree with that. I think it's really exciting. That's how I got into home ownership, is through a duplex, having that rental income. So I see that benefit, and yep, and really appreciate this event, and really look forward to working with the architectural community and interested stakeholders like Alejandro, doing great work as we develop this local ordinance where we can hopefully improve upon this start that the state's given us. So thank you, everyone.
Terrific. On that note, I do think it's a really remarkable moment with the progress we've seen and momentum from ADUs, and the work that the city and the Plan Department, Department of Building and Safety deserve great credit for the support of ADU production, the housing element, we have a lot of opportunities to think about where to take this good work next and where to apply the lessons that we took away from the low-rise design challenge. So with that, thanks again to all of the panelists. Thanks to all the audience members who joined us today, and for all of the Third LA and ICW programs that we have organized throughout the year. And we look forward to seeing you very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.